Such a good place to go. Let it snow, let it snow.
Salutations, our legion of elves and reindeer. Welcome to Podcast The Storm. I'm sorry, I'm just now opening my script.
We're behind today because we got talking backstage about the horrors of the U.S. educational system. Commiserations all around.
So welcome to Podcast The Storm with socially awkward snowmen, crazy stocking stuffers, and all around nerdy list members convened to talk and debate all things pop culture. With me, as always, is my co-host, Jolly Holly Bookworm, aka the Authenticator, Dalton L. Mortimer.
Good evening, everyone, and happy holidays.
And I am your host / Santa Claus burglar, the brainstorm pop culture. How's everyone doing tonight?
I am good, although I hear my cat meowing, and I'm gonna go deal with her now so that she's not meowing halfway through the podcast. I will be right back.
Yeah, so we have kind of a short list of stuff, but knowing us, it's going to take us a bit. I'm not entirely sure how long this show will run, but I think it might be relatively short. Possibly. I'm not going to with that. Yeah. I will set up the first thing, which will be the continuation of the video that we started last week, which is the Heathen Celebration of Yule by Ocean Keltoy. I'm saying that name right.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just setting things up right now. Okay. Yep. Right. Share. Right. Share screen. Yeah. Sorry. Let me say the whole title for the video. The Heathen Celebration of Yule, Ancient and Modern, and Was It Stolen? And we're going to be starting at 9:50, which is where we left off last week, which is Podcast of the Storm 145.
We are getting up there, folks.
Yeah.
Won't be long, and we'll be doing 50 or 150 rather.
Yeah. So yeah, if you guys want to see the first part, go check out the last week's video. It's in the playlist.
Most of the first half I didn't actually end up disagreeing with very much. Most of the issue I'm taking with Ocean here is his conclusions, and I know he's coming at it from a purely reconstructionist perspective, whereas I'm taking a more sort of broad approach and kind of looking at these cultures kind of in relation to each other, and that might be where we're parting ways. So that fair's fair there. but even so, I'll restate what I said last time, which is I think in his effort to remain as objective as possible, he may have ended up giving the opposition, quote unquote, um, too much credit, and we'll get into sort of how and why in this half probably. So, candy canes.
Yep. 1 second as I get to tab. All right. Yep. Candy canes.
For a second. While researching this video, I saw in advance that the Yule log was evidence that Yule was stolen by Christians because it was a log that took 12 days to burn, and that the 12 days of Christmas were originally the 12 days of Yule. This seems to be reverse engineered to me because, firstly, I couldn't find a primary source on this.
Okay, yes, this is apocryphal and largely bullshit. However, I will say that there is no reason to assume that Christians came up with the 12 days because something apostles, because we know, for example, that Saturnalia, the Roman festival that heavily influenced Christmas, occurred over the space of, I believe, the entire month of December, although it may have actually been 2 weeks or so, which rather does jive well with 12 days. And we know, for example, the Celts also had multi-day celebrations, and even in the previous segment of this video, Ocean admitted that Yule celebrations lasted for more than just a single day. So I don't see any reason why Christians would just pull the number 12 straight from their ass and therefore get credit for it, because the concept of multi-day celebrations is something borrowed from pagan cultures, and we know that they reskin or there's a great preponderance of things that they reskinned elseways, like, turning gods into either demons or saints, depending. So there's no reason to give Christians that much credit as to being able to conjure up, 12 days as an arbitrary number from thin air. However, I will agree that the Yule log burning for 12 days thing it's one of those apocryphal bullshit stories that sounds really nice in like a mythic context. So I'll give him that. However, there is something that he's not considering here, which is the Yule log as we currently have it was probably borrowed more from the Celts than Yule proper, because we know they kept both large central bonfires and also would then, at the end of the celebration, take torches from said massive bonfire and bring it into their homes and light their own personal homestead fires afterwards. So it's probably one of those things that borrowed from the Celts. And because the Germanic and Nordic peoples probably had fairly similar traditions, or a fairly similar tradition, and the word Yule is more palatable necessarily than Samhain for some reason. It probably was just one of those things like, they all sort of do similar things, so we'll call it a Yule log for reasons thing. I don't think it's something of Christian invention, because again, we have the documentation of what the Celts did, or at least some documentation of what the Celts did, and they largely borrowed it from that. And this is the part where being a just straight reconstructionist might be weakening the argument a little bit here, because Ocean primarily focuses on just Nordic or Norse reconstruction, and the problem being is these cultures don't often exist in vacuums. Yes, there are unique things to each culture, and I wouldn't dispute that, but there are trend lines because, let's face it, many of these holiday traditions come from practical reasons and or evolutionary psychology. So they're going to trend along similar lines given that they're similar celebrations. Not to mention that the Norse and the Celts did occasionally cross over, so I'm sure they borrowed from each other at least a little bit. Like, for example, runes. There is a Celtic um dialect of runes that is very similar to the Norse runes, although slightly different and altered and so on. So the problem being is these cultures don't exist in a vacuum. So going just purely, I only care about what is explicitly Nordic or Norse influence directly might be skewing the results a little bit here is all I'm saying. And I think this is one of those vantage points where I, as somebody who doesn't really have any particular allegiance to any particular culture, can look at it and go, okay, so these parts might not explicitly come from the Nordic Yule, but you look across the way a little bit to the Germanic Yule, and there's some stuff there, and then of course you look into the Celtic solstice celebration as well, and there's a lot of stuff there that they took. So even if it wasn't explicitly stolen from Yule, it was still stolen. The Christians still don't get credit, fundamentally, I guess is what I'm saying. But anyway, candy canes.
Yep. Okay. Candy canes.
And secondly, the 12 days between the Nativity and the Epiphany originated in Christianity fairly early on and do not seem connected to Scandinavian history. But thirdly, this seems to me to be a gigantic log, like enormous. Like, I understand the Yule log is this huge log at the center of the fire, but 12 days?
Again, this is where we agree. The myth of the Yule log being burnt for 12 days or being a massive log that burned through for 12 days is largely bullshit. However, again, I must point out that just because the Christian excuse for the 12 days is it's between Nativity and Epiphany doesn't mean that was the original justification. In the same way that just because they call Brigid a saint now doesn't mean the goddess Brigid didn't predate Christianity by a fuckload of time. Or, to put it another way, just because Kirk Cameron claims the reason we have Christmas trees is because something, 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 the cross, doesn't mean that he knows at all what he's talking about. And someday we should go through and rip Kirk Cameron saving Christmas a new asshole, because that bullshit is Christian sophistry to the extreme. But that's neither here nor there. Candy canes.
Candy canes.
12 days? I feel like I've seen a lot of wood eaten by a bonfire pretty quickly. That would be a log provided by Emir himself. It would necessitate that the Vikings have a complex trading route going all the way to California, such that they might import sequoias. And this probably wasn't an Icelandic thing, as wood was incredibly valuable in Iceland. So,
yeah, it's for one thing, this is one of those things that was probably borrowed more from the Germanic Yule than the Scandinavian or Nordic Yule, which is another aspect of this that I think might be worth delving into. Because yes, the Germanic peoples and the Scandinavians or Norse are different cultures, but there is quite a lot of overlap in the sense they both have a version of Yule. So again, this might be one of those cases of looking at this in a vacuum. He might have a point, but I think in philosophy there is this thing known as mistaking absence of evidence for evidence of absence, and I think that might be the mistake that Ocean is making here. I think because he is hyper focusing on strictly Norse and or Scandinavian and or Icelandic reconstruction, he might be trying to section off that tradition away from any of the other traditions that might have overlapped with or influenced it, and I think that's a mistake. Because the thing is, when you look at Christmas, you've got to look at it from many different vantage points because it was inspired by many different vantage points. For example, the Romans had Saturnalia or Sol Invictus. The Celts had their solstice. There's the Germanic Yule and the Scandinavian Yule. There's the Mithra Festival, which was a later sort of was a later holiday that sort of came about around the time of like the cultural cross-pollination that was brought about by Alexander, and so on. So it's one of those things of like Christmas as a tradition didn't form whole cloth from any one culture, but it is worth noting that of the cultures that influence what we now call Christmas, Christianity or the Abrahamic religions are the ones that kind of had the least influence over it. And that's the point that most people, I think, are making when they say it's stolen. They don't say it was stolen whole cloth, but much in the same way as much of what we now know as Halloween was taken from Samhain and the Celts. What we now call Christmas was taken from the Celts and the Romans and the Norse and the Germans and every fucker in between, to be honest with you, before it ever got to Christianity. And there's enough evidence of each of those acts of theft, quote unquote, individually to kind of assume that there was some similar relationship with the Norse, especially considering that as Ocean knows, and I know this because he was the first person I saw making the case online, Snorri Sturluson is kind of a Christian propagandist in a lot of ways, in that he tells the story in the most pro-Christian ways possible, and often just ignores the divinity of the Norse deities. Like I may be wrong and may be struck by lightning if I am wrong about this, but I believe Snorri Sturluson was the guy who assumed that the Norse gods were just immortal wizards that had tricked the Norse people into thinking they were gods. That was I believe that was his case that he made in one of the eddas that he is famous for having contributed to. So we know that Snorri is not a stranger to fudging the truth, especially in a pro-Christian context. And we know that every other culture in Europe at the time pretty much got something significant pilfered when it came to Christianization and the creation of holidays like Christmas and Halloween. So why would it be unreasonable to assume that the Norse were any different, especially given, again, the source we have is known for being a hype man for Christianity and for fibbing in convenient ways when it suits him. So even though we don't have direct evidence of it being stolen, I think this is one of those cases where it can be reasonably demonstrated or reasonably concluded that absence of evidence does not mean evidence of absence. It just means that we don't have as much of the primary sources as like. However, given the relationship between the sources we do have and the truth, as can be demonstrated, and the relationship of every other pagan European culture to what we now call Christmas, I would say it's a fairly safe and solid conjecture that Snorri Sturluson did what he always does and fibbed in favor of Christianity, like he's wont to do, and that large amounts of Yule were stolen for the purposes of Christmas, like it was for every other culture at this time, in various different ways. Now, it is possible because what we think of as the Norse culture is predominantly within the Viking era, and the Viking era was, Christmas had already been co-opted and homogenized by the time the Viking era rolled around, that Yule might have been one of the later additions, but there's nothing saying that earlier eras of Norse and Icelandic culture weren't co-opted in the meantime, or that Christianity therefore deserves any of the credit still. Moving on. Candy canes.
Mm-hmm. Candy canes.
It's doubtful that setting such a large amount of wood on fire would be seen as anything other than wasteful, even offensive. They say if you get lost in an Icelandic forest, just stand up. Another theory around this 12-day Yule log thing was that the tree would be brought into the house and would extend out the door, and they would move it as it...
Yes, and again, this is largely absurd, and I do agree with him that this particular Yule log story is probably apocryphal. But again, my contention is it's one of those things that the Germans and the Celts did, and the Icelandic people did to some extent, and it just got kind of mythologized as these things are wont to do, and then we came up with this absurdity to kind of explain that mythologization. Candy canes.
Candy canes.
And they would move it as it burned, and this would take 12 days. Now, maybe this was done somewhere, but I do not see it happening in medieval Iceland or Norway, some of the coldest places that had humans at the time. The idea of hanging your door open so that the burning tree trunk could stick out of it in the dead of winter seems to me a risky plan.
Agreed. Candy canes.
Mm-hmm.
Not least because you might freeze to death as all the heat you generate goes fluttering out the door, but the likelihood of setting your whole house on fire is quite high. But hey, the 12-day Yule log tradition is mentioned fairly widely, just not in any primary sources I could find, so I'm sure there's a way to do it.
Well, the most obvious way in my line of thinking is you light it when it's necessary to light it, and then you extinguish it before daylight, presumably, because then you wouldn't need it for light as much. And then you relight it later, and so on and so forth. That would be my most practical way of thinking of doing this. But I agree. The entire conceit of the mythos of the 12-day Yule log is bunk. But also, the notion that Christians came up with the notion of 12 days specifically to honor the apostles strikes me as one of those things that is Christianized bunk, much in the same way as, like I say, Kirk Cameron Saving Christmas makes the claim that the reason we have Christmas trees is because the cross was made of wood or something, which is bullshit. And the entire conceit of Kirk Cameron Saving Christmas is largely bullshit. Much like the notion of the Catholics coming up with Saint Brigid when they took the goddess Brigid and turned her into a saint for the purposes of propaganda is largely bullshit. And it's one of those these patterns of behavior can be reasonably documented. It happened in multiple other cultures at the time, and the primary sources we do have are rather known for obviously fibbing in favor of Christianity. So from this, I think it is a safe bet to conclude that while there may not be as solid of evidence as either one of us would like for Christians stealing Yule for the sake of Christmas, this is one of those cases where the phrase never mistake absence of evidence for evidence of absence kind of comes online. And it's not something you can use often because it requires very specific circumstances to be reasonably employed. But I think, again, based on all the other evidence we do have in comparable situations and the evidence we have of Snorri Sturluson being a pro-Christian fibber, and I'm being generous to him when I say that, then, A plus B equals C at some point, even if we have a lack of documentation. Because what we do have is the modern day tradition. What we do have is similar traditions in every other culture reasonably documented. And what we do have is cases where we can confirm that Snorri Sturluson outright pulled shit out of his ass to defend Christianity because he wanted to convert people. And A plus B plus C in this case equals D, which is Yule was probably stolen in the same way that a lot of Celtic traditions were stolen, or a lot of Roman traditions were stolen, or a lot of Germanic traditions were stolen, and so on, and so on, and so on. Now, there's an argument to be made for how much of these things were stolen, and how much of these things might have been later additions, but the fundamental question is there any reason to assume that enough originality remains if you remove all of the shit they stole elsewhere to call Christmas a explicitly Christian thing? And the answer is fundamentally no. Jesus was not born in December, he was born in the summer. And therefore we can assume that the documented moving of Christmas, quote unquote, to coincide with Yule and Samhain celebrations probably has a lot to do with why it's celebrated on December the 25th, and why it has a 2-week, roughly 12 days, window of being celebrated, because most pagan celebrations lasted between 2 weeks and a month, generally speaking, in a lot of different cultures. Maybe not specifically in the Nordic or Icelandic version, but Samhain did, Solstice did, Sol Invictus did, Saturnalia did. So, is it unreasonable to conclude that, much like Brigid being turned into Saint Brigid, the 12 days used to be symbolic of something else and were falsely attributed to being something, 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 the Nativity and the Epiphany, so as to Christianize something that previously was not Christian, in the style of a modern day apologeticist like Kirk Cameron. I don't think it is unreasonable to conclude that at that point. Candy canes.
I'm just ignorant. So if you're a Yule log expert, please let me know the proper tradition around this in the comments. I am, however, an expert in not making but eating chocolate Yule log cakes, which are delicious. Whatever the case, thank you for indulging me on this little
Unless
tangent.
Brainstormer
Let's get
left.
back on track. Snorri's description of hacking the good.
Something.
I was here. I just had my mic muted, and I didn't hear anything you were saying.
Hmm?
You didn't. I played the video.
No.
Just sworn Huh.
Maybe it's something on my end. I'll jump out and jump back in. Okay. Hello. Let's try that again.
Hello?
Hello?
Go
Yeah.
on. Hey, okay, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I think it's on my end. Yeah, service a little wonky.
Okay.
I think it should be good now for the most part.
Okay.
I
Well,
was Okay, I was just setting it. I'm just trying to set it back to 11:50.
yeah, where it was. We can go from there.
There we go. Shall we?
Yep.
Candy canes.
Candy canes.
I'm just ignorant. So if you're a Yule log expert, please let me know the proper tradition around this in the comments. I am, however, an expert in not making but eating chocolate Yule log cakes, which are delicious. Whatever the case, thank you for indulging me on this little tangent. Let's get back on track. Snorri's description of Hacken the Good.
I have nothing to say there. That's just funny and relatable and good for you, Ocean.
Okay. Before we start on the next part, I have to disappear real quick, handle something on screen. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll be back in 2 shakes of a jiffy.
That was hilariously old school, I would say.
That's how you say it, right?
Yeah, no, that's not how you say it.
Fuck it, I'm sticking with it.
But it is hilarious though. Just yeah, go with it.
I'm back.
Yep.
Okay. Shall we?
Yes. Candy canes.
Candy canes.
At the Yule feast suggests that all of the food consumed during Yule was sacred. Hacken is depicted as exceedingly uncomfortable with consuming anything, particularly the sacrificial horse meat. The king was meant to lead the celebration, so Hacken's refusal to participate is depicted as a massive point of contention.
Which this part I have no issue with Snorri on. He's probably depicting it as accurately as it would have happened, with the exception of obviously making the Christian guy the good guy because reasons. And I imagine if either Ocean or myself were there, we would probably be more on the side of the heathen attendees rather than the Christian king, because he showed up to Yule celebration and tried to make it fucking Christian. Why the fuck would you do that, you moron? But that's neither here nor there. Candy canes.
Candy canes.
The farmers offer Hacken the horse meat. He refuses. So they offer him the broth as a compromise. Nothing else, just the broth. He refuses that. So they offer him the drippings from the cooked meat. He refuses that as well. Finally, Sigurd, a local heathen jarl of generous reputation.
I'm not entirely sure what the word jarl means. I believe it's some kind of bard, but I might be wrong, like a poet slash storyteller slash singer slash something. But again, the word jarl is foreign even to me, so I'll have to look that up later. But candy canes.
Sigurd, a local heathen jarl of generous reputation and who would provide much of the food and sacrifice for the celebration, offers the compromise of Hakon gaping his mouth over the handle of the kettle where the smoke had settled from the meat. It's a lot of transition there, but let's see if this works. Now Hakon goes.
See, even here, even in Snorri's quite biased telling of this, I find myself siding with the heathens. It's like we're trying desperately to meet you halfway, you Christian bastard. Why won't you just yeah? But never mind. Candy canes.
Mm-hmm.
Now Hakon goes up and goes so far as to place a linen cloth over the kettle handle before he goes so far as gaping his mouth over it. And it is recorded that no one was pleased with this, Hakon or the farmers. But this little story shows how thoroughly it was understood that this food was considered sacred to.
Yeah, candy canes.
Mm-hmm.
The festival. Hakon understood it to be sinful to consume even the drippings from the cooked meat. So, how can we apply this to modern practice? Well, sprinkling blood everywhere may be a little unsanitary, and such a practice would require a fresh sacrifice.
I have nothing to add here. I agree. Candy canes.
Meat is largely considered taboo today, and the context of people conducting these sacrifices were farmers who depended on their livestock, with experience regarding their slaughter and preparation for a meal. Most people today aren't quite in that situation, but what does make sense is a
Candy canes. Let him finish his sentence.
mighty potluck with ritual and offerings. Yule may also be described as a time of generosity. Sigurd, the holder of the Yule festival in the saga of Hakon the Good, is described as an open-handed man, meaning that he would readily give gifts and share his wealth, and that he would defray the outlays of.
Okay, had a minor brainwave while he was talking. I think I remember reading something somewhere about the word jarl being one of the inspirations for the word earl, so I might have been completely off the base just then when I talked about it being a possible bard thing. It may have just been the ancient like Norse equivalent of an earl or a duke or something, which makes sense to me given the linguistics of the word. So I might have made a complete kid of myself just then, but I fixed it because I remembered having read somewhere a long ass time ago that Jarl may have been one of the origins of the word Earl. Yay. Huzzah. And candy canes.
Yep.
Of the temple, suggesting that he was the one who funded the feasts and provided the sacrifices. These acts are praised by Snorri, who said that this generosity is what gave him such a great reputation. Hashtag Jarl Sigurd for Santa 2021. Who's with me? So, as reconstructionists, we often.
Well, I mean, if you can make the necromancy work, then by all means, sounds like a good idea to me. Although I think Odin might be a little bit pissed, because that's usually his shtick. But nah. Candy canes.
Mm-hmm.
and digging through the past and pilfering little bits here and there from dusty old records to inspire our modern traditions. And there's a million ways for modern heathens to conduct a Yule festival as inspired by this passage. You might hold a gathering of friends with a potluck and a great fire, and you might hold a ritual where a portion of the food is tossed into the fire, or perhaps left near.
I mean, this is the part of the video where he's mostly talking to other heathens, which, again, is neither of us, so I take no issue with this, and it makes perfect sense to me, so yeah. And
The forest,
someday I hope to
lands.
take part in the heathen bloat, just because it sounds interesting.
Sorry, I thought.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, like, I kind of want to at some point be involved in a lot of different cultures, rituals, just because they sound interesting, and frankly they're far more spiritually rewarding, it seems, than anything I've ever seen Christians do, so yay. Plus, most pagan celebrations involve some sort of feasting, which seems like a much more edifying way of expressing spirituality than starving yourself, which again is very often a Christian or Abrahamic thing. Anyway, candy canes.
Yeah, okay.
Of the food is tossed into the fire, or perhaps left near the forest for the land spirits. Let's say you're an independent practitioner. You might have a little campfire outside with a small meal and offer a straw Yule goat to the fire as a votive offering to the various gods of Yule. Such a celebration would be entirely appropriate.
A votive offering, for anyone that doesn't know, is a offering that's supposed to sort of be symbolic or sympathetic to a proper offering. Like, if you don't have a living animal to sacrifice, you can sort of create a voodoo doll, essentially, of it, and it sort of counts symbolically. And that, and I realize I just way oversimplified that, and it may have come off as a little bit insulting. So if it insulted anyone, I'm sorry. But the purpose of the votive offering is basically, if you don't have or you can't afford the quote unquote proper offering, then the votive offering is supposed to sort of act as a surrogate. So yeah, that's just that term explained there. Candy canes.
Yep. Okay.
Spending some silent time with the longest night by the warmth of the fire, welcoming soul back into the sky. Someone in the city might light a candle at their altar and burn some incense, or perhaps they'll hold a Yule party with offerings to be disposed of the following day, or pour libation offerings for the gods. If you want more information on that, on
Candy canes.
pour libation offerings for the gods. If you want more information on that, on like what offerings are, how they work, etc., you can see my video on offerings for a more detailed discussion on that topic. But you can see how we can take these records and adapt them into our modern practice. We don't have to go look at the medieval source and then copy it directly in our modern practice.
Yeah, that's fair. Although I would say there's nothing wrong with trying to get closer if you can and want to. Because I don't know if this is like this for any pagans or any heathens out there, but if I have to, and again, I'm speaking as an occultist, not as a pagan. I'm a polytheistic occultist, but I'm not a pagan because I don't really hold with the religious rituals. In my opinion, rituals should be more functional than symbolic or artistic, and that seems to be the demarcation most people make between magic and religion. Is one is sort of trying to use the, for lack of a better word, the laws of metaphysics, and the other is trying to essentially just curry favor by means of like devotion. And again, but speaking as a polytheistic occultist who is not a pagan, if I have to cut corners in magical rituals, it pisses me off. So I can imagine there are probably quite a few pagans, especially in the Reconstructionist bent, because the Reconstruction is kind of the point of Reconstructionism, unsurprisingly. I imagine there's quite a lot of pagans that don't like cutting corners or don't like modernizing things. So yes, you can cut corners and personalize it as much as you want to, but you also you also shouldn't feel pressured to. If you're the kind of person who only feels right when you're doing it the right way, quote unquote, then all the more power to you as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, candy canes.
Yeah, sorry, spaced out there for a sec.
You're good.
So, candy canes?
Candy canes.
There's room enough for adaptation and interpretation. We do not live in that time. We live in our time. Our practice can be tailored to reflect our time period, our location, our living conditions, and our access to community or even desire to be solitary. So, when Hacken the Good moved Yule to the date of
And here again, I don't think he moved it because even in the previous segment, Ocean admitted it lasted 3 or 4 days starting on the 21st, which is unsurprisingly runs it all the way up to the 25th. So, yeah. And as we know that, for example, the Celtic solstice celebration often lasted from about the 21st through till first week of January or so, in the same way that Samhain usually lasts somewhere between the last week of October and the first couple weeks in November, for most purposes. So I think it's wrong to say that he moved it. I think he just took advantage of it, and maybe he didn't want to start it directly on the solstice because that would have been too close. So he just started it on the end day of Yule rather than the beginning day of Yule. But I don't think he moved it. I think he just took advantage of the flexibility of the date, basically. Because, as we know, Jesus was born in the summer, and it was originally moved to winter to aid conversion. So it's maybe by the time Christians tried to convert the Norse, it may have been an established thing already, but doesn't mean it's Christian. It just means that they had already previously stolen shit from Saturnalia and shit from the solstice, and probably also from the Germanic version of Yule. But that's neither here nor there. Anyway, candy canes.
Yep. Okay. Candy canes.
be solitary. So, when Hacken the Good moved Yule to the date of Christmas, Snorri records this as part of his strategy to convert Norway to Christianity. And his plan was met with some resistance. And it's an interesting story, but does that mean that Yule was stolen by Christians? Not really. It seems.
And this is exactly where we disagree. I wouldn't use the word stolen. I agree the word stolen might be a little bit harsh, but okay, let's be entirely straight up and honest with ourselves here. The turn of the previous century ad executives, like the ones that worked for Coca-Cola, had more influence over Christmas tradition than Christianity ever did, as did Charles Dickens, because at that point in European history, thanks to Oliver Cromwell and Bradford and Co., Christmas was outlawed because it wasn't Christian enough. And I share some sympathy with the opinion that if it weren't for Charles Dickens writing A Christmas Carol, many of the Christmas traditions that we now have probably wouldn't have survived as long as they have. So go Dickens. But my point being is Coca-Cola and Dickens had more to do with Christmas than Christianity ever did. And I think it's wrong to say otherwise. And I'm not saying that to crap all over Christians or anything, but the facts are the facts. The record is the record. And even most Christians now are to the point where they can acknowledge, yes, Jesus was likely born in the summer, and the reason we celebrate his birthday in winter is because some missionaries from thousands of years ago wanted to convert people. And that is true. No matter how you slice it, that is true. So, again, I think Ocean got to this point in an attempt to be extra objective because he didn't want to be taken for being biased. But I think he might have overshot his objectivity a little bit and given the opposition just a little bit too much credit. Because even if somehow none of the Nordic Yule traditions influenced Christmas, they had already stolen from Saturnalia, the German Yule, and the Celtic solstice. So at that point, how much Christianity is there left apart from the most superficial surface level stuff in Christmas? Candy canes.
Seems honestly that the opposite happened. Haakon's moving of Yule to the date of Christmas has allowed Yule traditions to live on through Christian culture. The name Yule, pagan. The Yule log, pagan. The Yule board, pagan. Christmas ham, likely a reference to Freyr, ostensibly pagan. The Yule goat,
Yeah, although usually the original impetus for it was boar, not just any pig. It was wild boar they were eating. But yeah. Candy canes.
very pagan, and likely evidence that Thor is part of Yule in some way. And among Odin's names was Yolnir and Yolfather, placing him as the master of Yule, the one who does Yule, likely influencing Joulupuki, and through him, Santa Claus. Yule wasn't stolen by Christians. In fact,
I mean, it was kind of, though. We know Snorri fibbed for the sake of Christianizing things. We know even if Norse Yule had nothing to do with anything, most of Christmas, quote unquote, was borrowed from previous pagan European cultures. So even if you want to say that the homogenized pagan influenced Christmas that they might have had around the time of the Norse cultures co-opted or was influenced by Yule, it's still like 80% pagan to about 20% Christian, and even about 10% of that is more to do with Charles Dickens and with Coca-Cola and the like than it is Christianity. So you're being very, very generous here, and I don't think it's entirely justified. I get it, because you didn't want to come out and be that pagan bastard. I know I know a lot of people who are really sick at this point of people mentioning that most Christian holidays are about 90% not Christian. But on the other hand, just because it makes people uncomfortable doesn't mean it's wrong. So there. Candy canes.
games.
It may be more fair to say that Yule stole Christmas. Yule was moved to the time of Christmas, and it allowed for these various existing folk traditions around the pagan celebration of Yule to become part of that Christian tradition. And today, now that heathenry has returned,
again, even if Yule stole Christmas, as you put it, what it stole then was like 80% non-Christian to about 20% Christian, and a good 10% of that was probably more to do with Dickens and the ad agencies of the turn of the previous century than it ever had to do with Christianity. And that's worth noting because that means there's about as equal secular influence over Christmas than there ever was Christian influence over Christmas. So even if Yule did steal Christmas, quote unquote, 90% of what they were stealing was already previously pagan in the form of Saturnalia, German Yule, and Celtic solstice. So you might be giving Christianity a little bit too much credit there. And by a little bit too much, I think it's viable to say a lot too much, considering that Christians, at least around the time of the Protestant Reformation, strictly outlawed Christmas because it was too pagan. So they made it very clear a long ass time ago that they don't want it. So why give it to them if they don't want it anymore? They made themselves very clear in law, in England at least, that they didn't want it. So fine, you don't want it, you don't have it, but don't come crying to us when it turns out it's like 10% secular, 80% pagan, and only 10% Christian then. Candy canes.
Yep.
we can celebrate Yule during solstice and borrow back many of these traditions that Christianity has kept waiting for us. But let me know your thoughts. What Yule celebrations do you have? Do you plan on holding a Yule ritual this year? Let me know down in the comments. But with that, hail to my patrons.
I mean, I always do some sort of ritual, but again, as stated, I'm not pagan and I don't identify with any particular path of paganism. I'm a polytheist and I'm an occultist, but I'm not pagan because when I work with deities or spirits or the like, I don't work with them in a faith context. I work with them in a practical, come to my circle, let's make a deal sort of way. In the manner of a respected dignitary or a royal, but not I don't worship the deities that I hope to work with soon. And it is, to be fair, I'm just getting into the prospect of evocation and summoning, so that might change after a few salty spiritual experiences, but at least for now, there's no worship involved in my practice. There's only respect and bargaining. Moving on.
Yeah, so just waiting for it to properly load. Yeah, this some Dalton sent me. This is from this is from usatoday.com. The 10 Worst Christmas Songs of All Time. This is by Mary Clark, published December 13th, 2021.
Okay.
It's the holiday season, and you know what that means. It's time to break out the Christmas songs. From the classics and the songs we grew up listening to throughout our childhood to more modern songs that have been accepted into the Christmas music lexicon, listening to holiday tunes always feels like putting on a cozy sweater with a hot cup of tea and watching a snowstorm. Well, mostly.
I mean, she's not wrong. Or at least in my case, she's not wrong.
No. For all the great Christmas songs that there are out there, there are some really, truly awful ones. Whether they're bad from a pure musical standpoint or they just really get on your nerves for some reason or another, I get it completely.
I mean, there are songs that do get on my nerves that I don't like listening to, but I'll have to see how many of my personal pet peeve songs wind up on the list.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I've put together the list of the top 10 worst Christmas songs ever created. So you too can feel validated in your music taste, or you can be upset with that one of your favorite songs of all time that you've cherished since childhood is actually bad. Let's dive in. Okay, that's a bit pretentious.
Yeah, there's some passive aggression there, but since you gave me permission, I'm going to use it now. Granted, I probably would have acted the same way regardless, but just to add insult to injury, you did give me permission tacitly there. So, yep.
All right, so number 10, You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch, by Thurl Ravenscroft.
How on earth can you not like You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch?
Okay, so You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch is a great listen in descriptors and adjectives. It does not inspire the Christmas spirit in me one bit.
Well, it's supposed to describe someone who is literally anti-Christmas spirit. That would explain why.
Right.
But it's go on.
I was gonna say, like you said, Mr. Clark. It's Mrs. Clark or Miss Clark.
Oh, did I?
Yeah.
I apologize. I didn't. I must have misspoke. But yes, Miss Clark. It's supposed to not inspire the Christmas spirit because it's literally describing someone who is opposed fundamentally to the Christmas spirit. That's kind of the joke. The joke is, in contrast to everything that is wonderful and glorious and Christmassy, here is the Grinch, who is none of those things. But what it is fun and jazzy, and at least as per like the last 50 years or so, jazz has become very closely tied to kind of Christmassy songs. So I would honestly have to disagree. It very much is, at least in the vein of Christmas. Now, granted, if you're looking for a song in The Grinch that is more Christmassy, then I recommend Fahu Forays. That is those two songs are basically directly opposed to each other. You've got You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch as the Grinch's sort of theme, and then you've got Fahu Forays as the who's unaware sort of passive retaliation to everything the Grinch represents, and also emphasizing the Christmas spirit. So if your problem is it's not Christmassy, then listen to the song on the soundtrack that is supposed to be Christmassy rather than the one that's supposed to be against it, please.
I will say it is damn catchy though.
Oh yeah, and it is.
It's like one of those songs that I don't mind having earworm with it. Like,
well, I mean, it's the Grinch animated special where that song first premiered was created by the same or one of the same animators that created Looney Tunes, so it's unsurprising that he knows how to make a classic.
Moving on.
Yep.
Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer by Elmo and Patsy.
Okay, why?
Description is a funny tale of a grandma getting drunk on eggnog turns horrific after being run over by a reindeer. Not only that, the song goes into pretty graphic detail of the aftermath of Grandma getting run over by said reindeer. But hey, at least the song sounds Christmassy.
Your definition of graphic is a little bit different from mine. The closest thing to graphic it gets is incriminating claws marks on her back. But yeah, once again, I'm gonna have to disagree with you here. Mostly though for personal reasons in my case, because I was very close with my great grandma growing up, and this was her favorite Christmas song. She always laughed at it and thought that she would wind up in this situation if it ever happened. So yeah, no, I can't call this bad. It's too good, it's too Christmassy, and it's too catchy, and it was my grandma's favorite. So nope, you can bite me on this one.
Mm-hmm. Moving on, number 8, Christmas Tree by Lady Gaga. I've never heard of this song.
Me either. As far as I don't listen to a lot of Lady Gaga just in general, but I didn't realize she created a new Christmas song. Because that's one of the great things about Christmas music is like 90% of them are covers. They're not new Christmas songs. So it's an interesting showcase in how different the style of different artists can impact the same material. Like every artist, every musical artist on earth has some version or other, or at least every major one has some version or other of at least a few of these songs. So you can kind of interestingly compare and contrast to the point that you have your favorites. Now, granted, I'm not saying you never get a good new Christmas song. Like for example, my mom every Christmas, basically pretty much after Thanksgiving dinner, breaks out the Kenny Chesney's Christmas CD, and she absolutely adores "All I Want for Christmas Is a Real Good Tan," which is the most redneck thing possible, mind you. I really like a similar song on that CD, which I believe is new to him, or was created by Kenny Chesney, which is a song called "Just a Kid." Don't ask me why I like it. Um, I think it's because it turned Jesus from a traditional figure into a rebel. And I've always kind of identified with that, that notion of he'll never amount to anything. He's just a kid. Well, I'll show you kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
That
The scripture, sorry, yeah, the description of it is, I love getting Lady Gaga, don't get me wrong, but this song is just terrible. Sounds like a very bad SNL parody. From its grating instrumentals and not very subtle innuendo, but no, it's real. Anyway, here's a palate cleanser of Lady Gaga absolutely killing this Sound of Music tribute. Okay?
Yeah, I've never heard this song, so I can't judge it.
Okay, so number
It
7.
does sound bad, though, I'm not gonna lie.
Number 7, Do They Know It's Christmas by Band Aid. Never heard.
I think we covered this song last year, didn't we?
I don't know.
It was one of the songs that some prick somewhere thought was problematic.
I know this song was made to raise money for the famine in Ethiopia in 1984, which is good, but the lyrics are condescending at best and offensive at worst.
Well, fuck your offense, madam. That's that. I will say though, the version of this that I've listened to the most is actually a parody version that was done by Dr. Random McCam, Tailed Feature, Warren Literally, Danny Duchamp, and I don't want to say and others, but genuinely I don't remember who else was involved in the parody version that they did. I just know those first couple. But for those that have never heard that version, it was a quasi-political version done about how totalitarian mask wearing was. On his channel, it's titled Masquerade, but the song itself, I believe, is called "Do They Know the Sickness Is Their Own?" But it's really good, and if the catchiness of the music is any indication of the catchiness of the original, then no. Do They Know It's Christmas is quite good and funny, so you can take your offense and shove it, my dear.
Number 6, Wonderful Christmas Time by Paul McCarthy.
Okay, I get why this one's annoying, because it is an earworm that's extremely repetitive. But, again, I'm going to have to defer to my sense of nostalgia here, because I believe this song was actually written for the 90s animated Rudolph that nobody but me seems to remember, because most people when they think of Rudolph stuff, they think of the Rankin and Bass stop motion special. But for those that don't know, there's a really, really good version of Rudolph from like 1999 or somewhere along those lines that has John Goodman as Santa Claus, Whoopi Goldberg as the villain named Stormella, Eric Idle as a fox named Slyly, and two quite hilarious elves known as Boone and Doggle. And I believe Simply Having a Wonderful Christmas Time was actually written for that that movie. So I'm gonna have to defend Simply Having a Wonderful Christmas Time, even though it's annoying, just because I really love that version of Rudolph and I wish more people remembered it. But description. Hello? Brainstormer?
Yeah, sorry, I was getting something ready for the next bit we're gonna do.
Okay.
Yeah. The descriptor for this is much like It's a Small World. It's a small world. Once Wonderful Christmas Time gets stuck in your head, it's there forever, and I mean forever. At least the jokes surrounding the song make it just a little more tolerable, but it's still a very trite tune. Trite.
Yeah, no, this one I get because it is an infectious earworm and it will never ever stop once it started. But again, I defend it on the basis of I really like that 90s animated version of Rudolph that nobody but me seems to remember.
Number 5, the Chipmunk song, The Chipmunks.
Aww. How can you okay, I get it. It's the high pitched voices probably, but still.
Who wanted this collaboration? Who did it? Why did this come into creation? Just to make my ears bleed? If so, you did a great job. Otherwise, what are we even doing here?
Well, I expect you don't have any nostalgia for the Chipmunks is the problem there. Whereas yeah.
Yeah, I'm on the fence about this. Honestly,
Well, yeah, probably because the Chipmunks you most remember are the live action CG movies
I
rather than the animated series.
I watched the animated stuff, mostly the specials.
Yeah, I imagine Frankenstein and Wolfman, right?
Yep, those are my
Yeah.
favorites. Well,
Yeah.
Frankenstein's monster at least.
Mm-hmm. Which dear pedants everywhere, and I know this is me committing pedantry heresy because I'm pedantic as fuck too, but the Doctor created the monster as a surrogate son originally, so it is fair to call Frankenstein's monster Frankenstein on the basis that he is the son of Victor Frankenstein. So there's that. But yeah, but the thing about the ears bleeding thing is I get it if you have no nostalgia whatsoever for the Chipmunks in any iteration, but for those of us that do have some kind of nostalgia for the Chipmunks, again, bite me, because the Chipmunks are awesome. Even in the annoying live-action CGI movies, which I saw all of in the theater because my stepdad's mom took us pretty much to all of them. And even they weren't terrible. I mean, they weren't great, and the 90s animated series and the 60s animated series were probably both better, even though I haven't seen as much of the 60s animated series, I'll grant you. I grew up obviously mostly on the 90s one, but yeah, I like the Chipmunks, and this was actually the song that ended up in the creation of the Chipmunks, because somebody realized that they could rev up the pitch by speeding up the record, and they decided to create the characters of the Chipmunks so as to justify that gimmick. Which to me is funny, because that means that the character dynamics of Alvin, Simon, and Theodore and Dave were established before the characters really even had a thing to base those personalities off of. People were just generally more creative or put in more effort when it came to selling shit back in the day, I think is what the thing is. Because back then they understood you can't just conjure up something from thin air and expect people to automatically get it. You have to actually give them something they can believe in to attach to. I miss those days when even cynical capitalists could at least put in effort instead of being cynical fucking jackasses. Moving on.
Alright, so number 4, I Want a Hippopotamus for Christmas by Gala Heavy. Never heard this song.
I've heard of this song, but I've only heard weird country renditions of it, because despite my mannerisms and meaner, folks, I come from the most middle of nowhere hickish part of Pennsylvania you can imagine, and so everyone in my general area listens to country music. And as you can imagine, with me being kind of more pompous, to to be both honest and not entirely too charitable with myself, country music got old quickly when I was a kid. But as a result, I've heard country song versions of every Christmas Carol because, again, where I'm from, and I think the version of this song that I'm most familiar with is the Mariah Carey version, although I might be wrong. It might just be someone that sounds an awful lot like Mariah Carey. It might have actually been the Reba McEntire version, now that I think about it. But regardless, I've heard of it. I've heard of this song, and it's hilarious. It's basically about a little girl who's like big over the top Christmas wish is she wants a hippopotamus for Christmas. And the absurd lengths her parents go to basically to ensure that Christmas wish gets met. And how like over the top idealistic she is at hoping that she gets a hippopotamus for Christmas. And then it winds up just being a little stuffed animal, I think, in the like music videos and stuff that I've seen, which is cute. It reminds me a lot of Merry Christmas, Drake and Josh, when the kid asks for a monkey in a cage. And yeah, but yeah, I've heard of this song. It's sweet and it's adorable, and if you're the kind of kid who asked for outlandish stuff from Santa as a kid, it's nostalgic.
Never did that.
Yes, I know. You would be always pointing in the right direction, moral compass. But some of us are a little bit more self-indulgent sometimes, or at least we were when we were children.
It's just the things I wanted are kind of easy to get, action figures and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I guess I've always just been practical.
With
Okay.
both, like there's something about that I can admire, but there's also something about that makes me a little bit sad. But that's neither here nor there.
Right. The description is this, and all I want for Christmas is my 2 front teeth are in the same vein of kids singing about what they want for Christmas, and that's just not for me. I get they're classics, but it's time to retire this genre of Christmas song. No.
See, if she had put "All I Want for Christmas Is My Two Front Teeth" on the list, that I would agree with, because that song does genuinely kind of annoy me. But for some reason, I end up relating to the kid who wanted a hippopotamus for Christmas, because I remember some of the more absurd things I asked for Christmas when I was a kid, and still kind of now. Because in my mind, Christmas is the time of year when you do like normal stuff is for the rest of the year. The wondrous stuff is for Christmas. But that's just the way my brain has always worked. Anyway, moving on.
Mm-hmm. Number 3, Santa Baby by Mike Bublé.
Buble.
Bublé.
I mean, I find him just kind of annoying in general, so tacit agreement just because I don't like Michael Bublé, but
but to be fair, I've only heard the female version of it, so
yeah, the classic, I want to say 60s version, the woman who has the very like sexy and provocative voice.
like honestly, you can picture Jessica Rabbit singing it.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
Right?
Or Marilyn Monroe. Yeah,
just the classic, like, I don't want to say
yeah.
but
The glamorous, over the top woman who is very posh and like and
I thought
knows it.
that was relatively recent, like 2000s.
No, that song Santa Baby goes back, I think, to the 50s or so, but I could be wrong.
I might be thinking of a cover of it then. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, it's one of those things of like they haven't honestly made a bunch of new Christmas songs since like the 70s or so. And again, the occasional one here and there I've heard, but most often the songs you hear at Christmas are the songs that your grandparents also probably heard at Christmas or thereabouts. But that's kind of part of the fun of them, because that means there's a continuity between that unique feeling of Christmas between all the generations, thereby making it timeless. It's kind of like how every year around Halloween somebody breaks out the Monster Mash, even though that was done by Bobby Boris Pickett in the 30s, I want to say, is the first recording of Monster Mash, but it will nevertheless make it every year into somebody's Halloween rotation. Well, it's the same way with Christmas music. There might be the occasional new Christmas song, but most songs done from Christmas are at least, early 20th century old, if not older in the case of most like hymns, like Silent Night or We Three Kings, or those have been around for hundreds of years.
Right. Okay.
In some version or other.
All right. So Michael Bublé is a coward for changing the lyrics to Santa Bunny, among other modifications, and I cannot be convinced otherwise. If you're going to cover this song, lean into it or don't do it at all.
I'll agree with that. I also get annoyed whenever people don't commit to shit. So I'm assuming she's thinking in terms of like he should have done it as a male cover, gay, which honestly, I'll co-sign that. It's very rare that I co-sign that kind of thing, but yeah, if you're gonna be this teenage wannabe Sinatra prick, then why in current year are you afraid of the gay? Lol.
Number 2, I Saw Mommy's Kissing Santa Claus, Jackson 5.
I wonder why she picks the particular version she picks, because again, because everyone under the sun has done a cover of most of these, you could basically just list the title of the song and everyone would know what you were talking about. I didn't even realize the Jackson 5 had a rendition of this, but
Yeah. So,
doesn't surprise me.
sure, you probably chuckled once you realized that Santa described in I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus is the kid's father, but the song loses any of its minuscule charm it has once you do.
See, I never assumed that. I assumed she was cheating on the dad with Santa Claus.
I
That was always my assumption.
Okay, that is some insight into how your brain works, Dalton.
It kind of goes in tandem with Santa Baby. It's you could almost create a movie or a show or something where the mom sings both Santa Baby and the kid sings I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus in the same plot, where the mom is essentially a Christmas gold digger and stoops Santa Claus in order to get better shit.
Okay, number 1, The Christmas Shoes by New Song.
Okay, this one I'm in entire agreement with. I hate this song. I hate it so much. And my mom loves it, but I can't. Every time I hear it, it just pain and suffering.
All right,
It takes away all my joy and makes me feel guilty for everything. And it's
I've
insufferable.
never heard of this song.
Good.
Okay.
Don't listen to it. It's bad.
Okay, so and the description is no, just no.
Yeah, Yep. That's all that needs to be said. You saccharine, emotionally manipulative piece of shit song. And that's the thing. It doesn't make you sad in a way that makes you feel satisfied. It makes you feel sad in the arms of the angels, like vet commercials that you see for like animal shelters and shit. Like, don't you feel sad for these abused puppies that it was showing you deliberately to make you feel guilty? Yeah, no. Well, I do, but you need to stop because it's emotionally manipulative and it makes me feel guilty for nothing other than having a reasonable, sense of self-worth when it comes to the holidays. And I don't need any other reasons to feel sad around the holidays, thank you. The seasonal affective disorder depression takes care of that nicely. That's why I need Christmas, because it cures my seasonal affective disorder for 5 minutes.
Mm. Okay, so done with that. Now we get to move on to something more fun. Like we did with Valentine's Day, we're doing a top 10 fictional Santa. Well, not top 10, but top 5 for each of us, 10 in total.
Yeah, so 10 in total. We're doing a collaborative top 10 of the best versions of Santa Claus portrayed in fiction. AKA the Santa Clauses that we wish existed when we were children, basically.
Yeah. I mean, technically, some of these did for me because I was growing up at the time when they were,
Yeah.
But yeah.
There's only a couple on my list that didn't come about when I was a kid, or of the age to believe in Santa Claus, rather, I guess.
Yeah.
But that one was so badass. The one that isn't was so badass. I had to include,
all right.
which we'll get into in a minute.
Yeah. You want to go first? I'll bring up the first image.
Sure.
Kringle from Dresden Files.
Yeah. As I'm sure everyone who will ever watch this is perfectly aware, I absolutely adore the Dresden Files, particularly in how it portrays Faye. To the point that I went and signed myself up with Mab, but that's a mistake for a different day that we've already covered on multiple occasions. Or not even a mistake. I'm not going to call it a mistake. It was just an oversight on my part. But unsurprisingly, because Jim Butcher is a nerd's nerd and a geek's geek who really seems to understand how magic works, even if he doesn't realize he does. The Dresden Files version of Santa Claus, aka Kringle, is a seriously badass motherfucker. And the backstory of it basically is, the version of Odin from the Dresden Files was once the high god of the world that protected the outer gates, which is a thing in Dresden Files that basically there's a gate on the edge of reality, and beyond that gate is basically Lovecraftian creatures. And every couple thousand years, a new pantheon has to take up the mantle of defending the gates. However, when their time passes, they either have the option of dying and disappearing, or they can go incognito. And being as they're immortals, most of them choose to go incognito. But the problem being is the forces that oversee the Dresdenverse are very, very concerned with balance, which means you can't have the power of a high god if you're not the high god anymore. So, in order to remain active in the game, quote unquote, which is what they refer to it as many times, Odin decided to split his power between three separate mantles. The first was the human, quote unquote, Donar Vadarung, who is a supernatural bounty hunter and security expert and assassin, ring runner. The second is Kringle, where the lion's share of what remains of Odin's power is invested. And he essentially calls in a favor with the Winter Court to hide in the Court of Winter, and in the process becomes Kringle, who is also, unsurprisingly, Santa Claus. And this version of Santa Claus is a badass because, of course, the more people believe in a particular fae, the stronger they get, generally speaking, unless they're tied to a literal force of nature, like the queens. But, being as Kringle is Santa Claus, he has a fuck ton of residual belief because, well, he does what Santa Claus typically does every year. And the way they explain his ability to do what Santa Claus does and go all around the world in just one night, yada yada, is time magic. In fact, he's such an expert in time magic that whenever time travel needs to be explained, it's always Kringle that ends up explaining it because it's basically his area of expertise. Other interesting things about Kringle in the Dresden Files is he only takes up the mantle of Santa Claus proper after Halloween, and the rest of the year he is essentially the warrior chief of the forces of winter, to the point that he is one of the beings that's capable of mastering the wild hunt. So yes, this is a Santa Claus who, if you piss him off, can sick the wild hunt upon you. And it's just so badass. But yeah, that's my number 5 is Kringle from Dresden Files. I could go into more detail, but it would require spoiling things and or forcing Brainstormer to read a bunch of the Dresden Files that he's not ready for yet. So suffice it to say, this version of Kringle is both kind of accurate to lore and also just straight up badass in a way that only Jim Butcher seems to be able to write these days. So Kringle gets a mention from me.
Right.
Your turn.
Yeah. Okay. It was kind of like one of the first ones I ever thought of for this list. Which is Rise of the Guardians, Santa Claus. I believe he has a different name that he goes by, but for the life of me, I can't remember, and I should have done more research beforehand. But I like this one a lot, mainly because I like the look of him. You know, he's voiced by Alec Baldwin, which is cool. But also, like, he's, again, like, one of the favorite scenes of Rise of the Guardians, and there are a lot of them, obviously.
Yeah, it's a great movie.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, totally underrated. Is the scene between him and Jack in the North Pole, where, like, he talks about, like, the center, like, all Guardians have, and, like, talks about, like, you know, how he sees the wonder of the world and stuff. And how he's able to, like, create all these amazing toys and things, and just, again, has this grand imagination and creativity. And I guess in a way I kind of relate to that. Which is funny because I haven't really left my house in like a year, so well, much. I go outside sometimes and stuff.
Yeah. But you should probably fix that at some point in the
well,
near
I'm not
future.
I'm not going out now because you know it's December and it's goddamn
yeah,
cold.
snow, but
no, in snow. It's just freezing out there.
Well, yeah, but still, when weather permits again, you probably should fix that.
Yeah. Yeah, and like in a way, I just again I kind of relate to that and like how like viewing the world is just seeing all these amazing things in the world that I don't think a lot of other people see. Like see the world as I do, you know. Not saying that's good or bad. I'm just pointing that out. Plus, it's just fun, you know.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way with Kringle. Like there's one scene in one of the Dresden Files Christmas short stories where Harry is confused by the fact that Kringle gives him things because in the Dresden Files, and this is largely accurate to the lore, fairies don't ever give things unless they've been given something beforehand or they're bargaining for something. But Kringle is the one fae who can break that rule. And he explains to Harry that Harry was on his list of people to deliver to. And Harry starts throwing a shit fit because Harry is an idiot who can't take a gift horse to save his life. But Kringle just looks at him dead in the eye and goes, "Call Kris Kringle a liar on Christmas Eve one more time. I dare you." And Harry shuts up. It's hilarious.
So next one is one I haven't seen because I'll be honest, I didn't get into the show. It's my fault. But we have Nick. This is Dalton, so I'll let him talk.
Nick / the immortal avatar of goodwill from the librarians. And this is another one of those warrior Santas that kind of gets accuracy points, which is going to become a running theme on my list, I think. This Santa is unique in the fact that he doesn't give gifts, quote unquote. He gives a single gift, one, which is he goes throughout the world, throughout the rest of the year, collecting the energy of residual goodwill from humanity, and then on Christmas Eve, he rises into the North Pole, the Aurora Borealis of the North Pole, and delivers the gift back to humanity by allowing all that positive energy to flood back into the world through the ley lines. The way one of the characters in the Librarians puts it is he recharges humanity's karmic battery. And that it's just there's something so, again, both accurate and badass about that I have to give it props. Plus, it's Bruce motherfucking Campbell, and if you had to cast a warrior Santa Claus, it's a good choice. Which the Librarians is always great for casting. Like they're always great at casting like character actors and things. But yeah, this one's good. There's a subplot in the episode that features him where Eve Baird, the guardian of the Librarians, hates Christmas because she was a soldier and she only associates it with loneliness and violence, and she doesn't like that people quote unquote lie about how idyllic Christmas is. But she actually ends up having to do the delivery for Nick because he is weakened by something the villains are doing in the episode. And she ends up having to be the vessel because she was actually born on Christmas Eve, and that's why her name is Eve. And at one point in the episode, Nick almost lets it drop that that's why her name is Eve, and she glares at him until he shuts up. This is another version that acknowledges kind of the origins of Santa as a concept, because he can take on different forms based on which culture or which century he's in at the time. And they do at least do a little lip service to him being Odin, because at one point he gets involved in a bar fight because, he was in Scandinavia at the time, which is just hilarious to me. But yes, another in the case of part accuracy, part badassery, part just I would love for this version of Santa to have been the version of Santa from when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm. Let me know.
Yep.
Okay. 1 second as I prep stuff. Okay. Yeah, this is one of mine. It's not a picture. It is a video. And I'm surprised Dalton doesn't know about this one. This is Santa Claus of Robot Chicken. And
yeah, the thing is, I just don't watch that much Robot Chicken, to be honest with you.
I honestly don't blame you, because it was like it's like with the Venture Brothers. You never really know when they're releasing a new season.
Mm-hmm.
They take their time, which I don't mind and I respect.
But it makes it nigh impossible to actually follow it.
Yeah. But this is like, for one thing, it's voiced by, most of the time it's voiced by Seth MacFarlane. And he does a great. But like this Santa Claus, who they keep pretty consistent throughout the sketches, is kind of he's really fucking cool. Like he's kind of treated like an actual just person,
Mm.
but also like a badass as well. Like
Mhm.
it was either this one. I chose this one, but because it was funny because like it talks about Coca-Cola and shit.
Mm-hmm.
But also there was one that does it's a parody of Casino Royale's opening.
Ha.
Yeah, with Santa where he confronts a naughty child.
Oof.
Yeah. And it's just really fun. And I'm gonna play this whole thing through. It's only like 2 minutes and 21 seconds long. It's actually like one of the more cinematic sketches of Robot Chicken. And Dawn, can you see this?
No, I have to jump out and jump back in.
Okay.
1 second.
Can you see now?
Yes.
Okay. So shall we candy canes, my dear bud?
We shall candy canes.
All right. Candy canes.
So, to sum up, we basically co-opted Santa Claus and made him synonymous with Coca-Cola.
I have to say, it's a breeze signing endorsement deals with fictional characters.
Are we sure we don't want to replace him with Britney Spears?
Ho, ho, ho! Gentlemen, please. No need.
My favorite Robot Chicken sketches are often the ones that say something but are still fucking hilarious. You know?
Like now I'm just imagining if some of the other entries on our list were in this situation, because if it were Kringle or the Rise of the Guardians Santa Claus, most of these guys would probably be dead by now.
Oh, you haven't seen nothing yet. You haven't seen nothing yet.
Oh boy.
But yeah, this is like me being kind of a director and stuff, like guy who's worked on like film and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and appreciate the art of stop motion a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's a painstaking effort and stuff.
Yeah.
But I love how this really does look very like kind of like you can tell it's still kind of low budget, but there's like a cinematic quality like to the lighting and stuff.
Yeah. It's low budget, but it's still the work was put in.
Yeah. Shall we?
Yeah, candy canes.
Candy canes.
To get up. Who are you? Why, I'm Santa Claus. I was just flying by and heard everyone having a good laugh in here. Please, someone tell me what was so funny. Make me laugh. Well, allow me to repeat a joke my lawyers told me the other day. It involved a large multinational corporation.
Yep.
Dude, this is like a Tarantino scene, you know? Like the tension and stuff.
Again,
Oh my god, could you imagine Tarantino directing a Christmas movie?
And now I want that. And what's more, get Christoph Waltz, because I know Christoph Waltz and Tarantino are really close. But
yeah, well, dude, I loved him as like he played an amazing villain as Hans Landa in Inglourious Bastards, but I absolutely loved him as Dr. King Schultz
in Django. Yep.
Dude.
Yep.
Oh, by the way, did you know that? And like, I'm sorry, this is a total tangent here, But did you know that there's a crossover comic between Django and Zorro?
I did not. That
Yeah,
is awesome.
I just found out that like a couple months ago. I tried looking into it, but it's very hard to find.
But yes, give us a Tarantino Christmas movie with Christoph Waltz as Santa Claus. Hell, actually, normally when I think of Kringle in terms of Dresden Files, I go with Arnie because he strikes me that Arnold would be really good at playing the Dresden Files version of Kringle, and it would fit with Jim Butcher's geek cred. But now that I'm thinking about it, I want Christoph Waltz to play Kringle.
You might have to bulk up a bit, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, put him in touch with whoever J.K. Simmons's trainer was for BBS. That'll do.
Yeah. Shall we?
Yep.
Candy canes.
Candy canes.
That's been using my likeness without permission or compensation. Ho, ho, ho! Isn't that hilarious?
Now you listen here. Santa Claus doesn't exist. We all know that.
Now, why would you say that, Larry? Is it because I didn't give you the Louisville Slugger you asked for when you were 9?
How did you know that?
I know all.
Okay, I wanted to say this earlier, but I think after this, I don't know why, but I kind of wanted Santa. I kind of feel like if Santa Inc. was like this, it'd be very interesting.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. It also reminds me of the actual animated special that went along with Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer.
Yeah.
Because that version, I honestly should have put him on this list too. Honorable mentions to both him and the Hogfather from Hogfather as well. But yeah, this has always been my favorite part of any version of Santa Claus is the like almost eidetic memory for what everyone wants and knowing exactly what to get each individual child. And Kringle takes this to another extreme, and that's another reason why I like him because he is an incredibly powerful Fae. His gifts are always magical artifice. So like when he gives Harry a mug of coffee exactly like his father used to when his father was alive, because Harry lost his father at a young age, and it actually causes him to relive the memories while he's drinking it. So I've always loved the idea of a Santa that's actually capable of making magical objects for obvious reasons. If anyone can't be smart enough to put that together. But I've always enjoyed the idea of Santa as a gift-giving encyclopedia and an artificer kind of thing.
Well, what I was talking about with like Santa Inc., right? Was again like the kind of corporatization of Santa Claus.
Mm-hmm.
And by that, I obviously mean like
the Coca-Cola style.
Yeah,
corporatization. Yeah,
that and also kind of like kind of mixing like I don't know like a show like Mad Men, maybe Silicon Valley. You know, the ones that kind of
The Office. Those kind of.
Yeah, the ones that kind of deconstruct the movie Hollywood style of corporation and like really
the Office space. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I get a sense of Breaking Bad from here, but that might just be me.
And honestly, you could almost make this sketch concept its own movie. Like Santa decides to sue the corporations who use his likeness. That would be interesting.
Yeah. You know, now that I think about it, I should have gotten the one. This would have been funny because it combines two things. One is my favorite like comic book superhero, Superman. Like it's like Santa Claus who lives in North Pole, right? And the Superman who has the Fortress of Solitude in the Arctic.
What are they, neighbors?
Yeah, they're neighbors, and it's. You remember that movie? You remember that movie Deck the Halls with Danny DeVito and Matthew Broderick?
Yes, I do.
It's
It's
like
not a great movie, but it hits some of the right notes sometimes.
it's basically that. Although I have to say, I don't mind their interpretation of Superman. They just make him like a super douche, which I mean, realistically, yeah, kind of going to be that, even though if he is a great hero and stuff.
Yeah, everyone makes that obvious observation of
I mean,
he
he's not
shouldn't
like
be. Yeah,
he's not like he's not evil or anything. He's not an evil.
he's not Homelander.
No, he's just a douche. Like a frat boy kind of deal.
Well, to be fair, that's kind of how every character in Robot Chicken is portrayed a little bit.
Yeah, fair enough. That's actually pretty fair. Anyway, shall we?
Yeah, candy canes.
This is my favorite sketch of Santa, honestly. Yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of things, Larry. I know that you've been on my naughty list since '72. I know that your company has been using my image to promote your product since 1931, and I know I've never seen a dime. And you know what that means, Larry? I know you're a thief.
I mean,
yeah, this totally this feels like an inspiration from Tarantino.
he's not wrong. And to be fair, again, if this were some of the other versions we had on this list, pretty sure 90% of this room would be dead by now.
I mean, let's be honest, they're all going to die anyway. This is just more drawn out.
Yeah,
that's what I've done.
But if this had been Kringle, and even to some extent, if this had been if this had been Rise of the Guardians, Santa, both of them probably could just snap their fingers and permanently be dead or something. I almost would want to see a pissed off Santa Claus turn people into statues made of coal instead of stone. That would be really cool.
Yeah. Shall we?
Yeah. Candy cane. See, this is how you do dark, twisted, cynical Christmas without making it insufferable, Santa Inc.
I don't know if it's cynical.
Well, in the sense that I don't think any version of Santa Claus worth their salt would really sue for money in this way.
Well, he's not suing. He is literally just killing all of them. So.
Well, that's true, but the reason he's doing it is he didn't see a dime of the monies.
I mean, to be fair, from the 1930s to whenever this sketch came out, it's been a while.
And let's also be fair. How much money has every other corporation also made by proxy because of that?
Yeah,
how many mall Santas have there been over the decades? And marketing campaigns that feature Santa Claus and on and on and on.
Yeah.
By rights, Santa should be Santa should maybe have twice as much money as Elon Musk right now if he existed and pursued damages.
Well, to be fair, again, if he's immortal, well, let's assume Santa is immortal, right?
Yeah.
The dude's probably the richest man on Earth for, I don't know, a couple centuries at most.
Yeah, and not to mention however much money he saved up over the years, because I mean he does only go out one day a year, and it's a massive manufacturing operation up there if we're playing it straight. So
yeah.
Santa puts Santa puts Amazon to shame
Oh,
as a concept. So yeah,
Kate?
candy canes.
I'll expect my check in the mail.
Oh, yeah, he didn't kill all of them, so I was wrong on that one. It's been a while since I've seen this, so.
Candy canes.
Candy canes.
You can spell North Pole, can't you? Oh, and about that talk of replacing me with Britney Spears. Think again. Ho, ho, ho!
Yep, that was fun.
Yeah. Okay. So, the next one was the 2000 one, right? That you wanted, that you.
Yes,
released?
the animated adaptation of O. Frank Baum's The Life and Adventures of Santa Claus.
Yeah. Should show up now. There we go.
Yeah. This one I include just because it's probably the best origin story for Santa Claus. Like, there have been a bunch of possible origin stories for Santa Claus. Like, there's the Rankin and Bass version. There's the 90s Santa Claus Origins movie version. There's the Santa Claus with an E as in contract version, which I admit I do like, although I don't think Scott Calvin is a very good version of that. I think someone better probably should have been picked for the purposes of that universe. But this version is the version that is the most, like, seems to be the most well thought out and mystical version of the origin of Santa Claus, and he's so, like, benevolent and so loves just specializing for every child what they specifically need most. It's just between the actual, like, story of, you know, the lore and everything, and just how Santa Claus-ish he is. I had to include him on this list. Although it's partly nostalgia because I remember watching this when I was very, very young, and I only saw it once, but it always stuck with me for some reason. I don't know why, but this has always been my default. Like, if there is a real Santa Claus, this is probably something along the lines of his origin. So yeah, that's why he's included here. I almost put the Santa from Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer here, and I almost put the Santa from Jackie Chan Adventures here. But this one just, again, it recaptures the wholesomeness and the magic and the over the top nature of Santa Claus as a concept, so it made the list.
Right. Moving on.
Yep.
Okay.
Candy.
Okay, so give me a minute to get things up. Okay, alright, so let me get the share ready. Okay, so this is gonna be a weird one because I'm not gonna play the video for this one. I'm just gonna like move it around to some stills just to show it. This is from a music video made, I believe, last year. It's like a metal music video, metal Christmas. This is from a YouTuber called Heather Lynn O. who I believe is part of something called. If anyone's ever heard of Black Rifle Coffee Company,
Mhm.
I believe she's part of that. And okay, so it's weird for me to like talk about this. This music video, and like you can watch it yourself. Like a link is down in the description for it. This is it's called Santa Wants to Slay, and like Dalton had for for Kringle and somewhat Nick. This is like a warrior Santa.
Mhm.
Dalton, can you see like the image on?
Yes.
Yeah, and I like the aesthetic. I think it was cool, and this music video isn't bad. Personally, I like the chorus a lot. It's just like really epic sounding and stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah, I like the metal warrior Santa look. Like, you know, like the dude does Krampus's job as well.
Which is always interesting. They haven't really touched on that as far as Kringle yet in the Dresden Files, but I could totally see Kringle doing that as well. Although my favorite scene regarding Kringle is probably when Harry first meets him and he just starts fanboying, but then he realizes that he hunts with the Earl King, the King of the Goblins, and he just looks at him and goes, "But dude, you're Santa Claus. Why would you?" And Kringle just goes, "Not until after Halloween. I have to have my fun every now and again, or else I go nuts."
Yeah. So yeah, and it's just like yeah, like I said, like I like the look of this Santa. It's just like it's badass. As stereotypical as it is, like I would totally see this as like a '90s image comic
Rob
character.
Liefeld, Santa Claus.
Yeah, but it's still pretty cool.
Hmm.
um, hold on. Uh, yeah, just like it's so over the top that it's just fun, you know.
Hmm.
Like I think that's just what gravitated me towards it is the absolute fun of it,
Yeah.
which is something we rarely get these days. So you know,
Yes, heaven forfend things should exist for their own sake and on their own terms, rather than
um,
just being a means to an end.
yeah, like I don't really have much to say for this one because I feel like watching it makes more sense. Like it's hard for me to describe it. I like it because I think it's cool. I guess it's really the only way I can really say why I like this version of Santa that I've seen.
Hmm.
Yeah, like I said, if you guys want to like listen to the music or watch the full video, just check out the description. There's a link below. Yeah. Um, Also, there's a part of him here that is riffing on a guitar. I think it's also a battle axe.
He and Valhallan would get along really well.
Or Marceline, if anyone knows Adventure Time.
Hmm. And for those that didn't get the reference I just made, I was making a reference to one of the Justice friends from Dexter's Laboratory.
Oh no, I got it. Yeah.
Yeah. Valhallan, the Viking god of rock, which I so wish was a thing.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, like I said, again, I always put everything I can. I always put everything in the description best I can, and the link to the music video is down below. So Next,
Yep.
which is the Narnia one, right?
Yes.
Okay. Pull up the image. There we go. Yeah, I won't lie. This one was a little hard to find, like a good image at least.
Mm.
I don't know why.
Yeah. I've always just loved this one. And also as somebody who really like didn't stick with toys for Christmas for very long. I think I was like 8 the last time I asked for anything explicitly toy-ish. Um, I've always liked the idea of Santa bringing more like magical objects rather than just toys. And this one is one that does that kind of thing. I also like the notion of him kind of being at odds with the White Witch. That kind of I I dislike the Narnia mythos generally because it's the Christianity is just so goddamn heavy-handed. But um I like the idea that he's been waiting to give Christmas to Narnia for 1,000 years or however long the White Witch puts the spell on, and he's just excited to be able to do his thing again. Which just plus, I'm not gonna lie, the stuff he gives to the Pevensey children, I want, especially the Phoenix arrows and the Fire Blossom thing. Peter can keep the sword. I don't really like. I like swords, but there's nothing really particularly special about his sword. It's not like it's Excalibur or anything. So I if I had my druthers, I would have probably asked for the Phoenix arrows and the Fire Blossom nectar for Christmas. This guy is just it's so wholesome and it's so perfect to what I always imagined the notion of Santa to be. So he he makes it on the list.
Moving on.
Yep. Next.
Okay. All right. Well, mine is. I won't lie. The last two in my list were kind of hard to find. Like just to think about, like what other fictional versions of Santa Claus that I really liked.
Mm-hmm.
And I got this one. Santa Claus, the Vampire Santa Claus from Billy and Mandy Save Christmas special. Or was it a special?
It was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, one, he's voiced by the always comedic, always fun Gilbert Gottfried. Did I say that name right?
No.
But also like he's kind of treated as like a regular person, and I've always liked how even though someone has like this mythic status, they're still kind of just a person. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like not. I know you would disagree with me on that, Dalton, but what I mean,
Yeah. But
what I
go
mean,
on.
what I mean at the very least is that it's more or less haven't let the reputation they've garnered, uh, gone to their heads.
Mm-hmm.
In a way, it kind of did for him on the fact that he was, the thing I like about this Santa was he was flawed. You know?
Mm. And I guess that might be why I don't really like this version because it's the problem of Billy and Mandy, I think, honestly. It's because and I like Billy and Mandy, I do, but because everything in the Billy and Mandy verse is so dark and cynical, you either have to make Santa incompetent in this universe or you have to make him straight up evil. And thankfully they didn't go with the he's straight up evil angle. his ball and chain notwithstanding. But I just like there doesn't seem to be room for sincere whimsy in the Billy and Mandyverse, because every time something is genuinely whimsical in the Billy and Mandyverse, it either dies horribly, like the little alien from the planet when Billy wishes to be a superhero who can spew yogurt everywhere, or it gets twisted into something evil, like the teddy bear that Erwin wishes for in the Phrenamular Wish Granting Skull episode. And I can't. This is one Christmas special that I like it for being a Billy and Eddie episode, but I can't enjoy it as a Christmas thing because
I will grant you that is fair, but also I think I myself like it specifically for the concept of a vampire Santa Claus.
yeah, that would have been interesting, but I kind of wish that Santa and his wife had been kind of in on it together, and that she had turned him into a vampire like centuries ago, and that's why he's immortal. That would have been, I think, a more
Also,
interesting.
why he delivers all the presents in one night.
Yeah, because daylight not so good for the vampire people. But I think that I think you could have done a vampire Santa without being quite this dark and actually kind of fitting it more into the season of
But
Christmas.
overall, I just I don't know. I enjoyed it for what it was. Like I took it as face value, and like it's funny in its concept. Plus,
Mhm.
I'm gonna bring this up with the next one. Hold on. When they were young, which I don't know, like in the flashback they showed of, Santa and Nancy Claus, who's like Mrs. Claus.
Yes.
I don't know. Like, it looked like to be Victorian era, but that doesn't really like.
Yeah, that doesn't really make sense because I mean, presumably somebody has been doing the Santa shtick for centuries beyond that.
The dude scored with Mrs. Claus. I'm not gonna lie.
Fair.
So he has
Yeah,
something.
no, he definitely did. I mean, most versions of Mrs. Claus get lucky because they kind of backdoor themselves into being immortal. So, although I guess in versions of the story where Santa is also an extension of Odin, I guess Freya is by default Mrs. Claus or Frigga.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like accidental backdoor immortality in the Billy and Mandyverse.
Yeah. Wasn't she a vampire first though?
Yes, I believe she was. And this is why I think it would have been more interesting if she was the reason he became immortal by turning him into a vampire.
I don't know why, but a vampire Santa Claus would sound super interesting in the setting of Castlevania. I don't know why.
Like, no, you're not wrong. That mental. I was literally imagining Dracula trying to do it, especially now at the end of season 4 that he's alive again with Lisa. I like a Dracula who secretly became Santa Claus and uses his incredible magic to make the Santa Claus thing work.
Well, to be fair, Santa Claus, as we know it conventionally, probably would have been around that kind of conception. Probably would have been around that time, actually.
Yeah, Nicholas of Myra, aka Saint Nicholas, probably was born around, I want to say, like 1500. So yeah,
Yeah, it was like the late if I remember correctly, it's like Castlevania said in like the late 15th century. So
Yeah, so turn of the 15th into the 16th century. Yep.
well, beginning of the 16th.
Yeah. So yeah. And I could definitely see Lisa doing that.
Yeah.
I could see her kind of goading him into doing that.
Yeah.
I imagine though, like just for the sake of like a Castlevania holiday special, I imagine Lisa and Vlad go to Trevor and Sypha and Alucard to get help with it, and then they all get involved with it, kind of like with the Jackie Chan Adventures Christmas episode, where like the entire J team ends up pitching in. And side note, if we want to expand this out into the elves of any given particular Santa Clauses, I think my favorite elves in any Christmas media ever has to be Elvin and crew from Jackie Chan Adventures. Because the way they use elf magic in that is just awesome. And I love that Uncle has been on the nice list for like decades. Because being, good wizard and everything, that works.
Yeah. Moving on to our final picks.
Yep.
Okay. For Dalton, it is
Kris Kringle from the 1994 version of Miracle on 34th Street. Just because, as far as like traditional Santa Claus go, this is the guy that I would want to be in charge of, making all the Christmas wishes come true. Like there, yeah, and I guess the best way to explain this is to describe one of the scenes from the movie. Because there's a scene where he's playing the department store Santa, of course, and he's doing an amazing job to the point that like a lot of people line up because he's doing a better job than like every other department store Santa out there. Probably because he's the real one, but that's neither here nor there. And this mother brings her daughter in. Her daughter is deaf. And the mother politely says to him, you don't have to talk to her. She just wanted to see you. She's deaf. And not to be outdone, our eponymous Kris Kringle here starts sign languaging at the child. And that whole exchange is just glorious. Because it so encapsulates everything that is what Santa Claus should be. Not just magical, but magical in a particular way for every child, making every child feel like they're special, they're heard, their particular interests and hobbies and eccentricities are all, being catered to. Which means that if the child is deaf, then that Santa Claus had better goddamn well know sign language now, shouldn't he? So it's just, I defy anyone to watch that movie and not enjoy that Santa Claus. And the thing that makes the remakes version of Kris Kringle better than the 1940s version, in my opinion, is the 1940s version always seemed more angry, whereas the 94 Kris Kringle is just happy to be doing what he's doing. And he not only enjoys what he's doing, but he is smart enough to know that he has to work at it and to specialize in it. Moving on.
Mhm. All right, so I prepped a lot of pictures for this one. So you and I recently had a big old discussion of this. about this certain Santa Claus. I don't know.
Yep.
Well, we might have discussed it last week, actually.
Yes.
This from the what was it? I don't think it had enough like the Christmas special for Fairly Odd Parents. I don't remember if it had an official name.
Christmas every day.
Oh yeah, look. How the fuck did I remember that? But yeah, yeah, I really like this Santa because, well, okay, for background for people who don't know, for most of the year, Santa, or is he referred to Santa all the time, or
Nick.
yeah, Nick is, well, more or less, it's corporate for most of the year. Which I actually have an image for that, and I don't know why I showed that one first. Hold on. Go. Yeah, yeah. This is what it looks like.
Actually, no. I think this one might be called Kris Kringle too. I don't.
Either way.
I'd have to actually look it up.
Either way. Yeah. It's like the North Pole is his base of operations for his business, which I think is mostly like for most of the year it's shipping. Like
Yeah, it's a parody of like '90s corporate culture, which is basically timeless.
Yeah. And again, this is kind of what I feel like Santa Inc. should have been.
Yeah.
You know?
So much potential in the concept, but they didn't have first fucking clue of how to use it.
Yeah, and the fairies, I think it's just the fairies. I don't know if it's the pixies or the anti-fairies or
I think it is just the fairies, although I imagine the elves probably help somewhere, because it seems odd to me that for as many elves as he has, they rely on the fairies of fairy world to do the heavy lifting with this. Again, this is why the elves from Jackie Chan Adventures make the most sense to me, because the way they kind of use Santa as a channel for their magic rather than outsourcing it.
Yeah, and yeah, the fairies pour all their magic into one day a year, so he can become like the traditional jolly holly fat man.
Yeah, yeah, and he's basically bordering on all powerful because he's just overflowing with magic.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's and the thing I liked about it is like again, he is somewhat shown like he puts like I don't think his personality really changes. To be fair, when he's
it's not entirely clear. It does seem somewhat involuntary when we see it transferred into him when he's in corporate stooge mode.
Yeah, that's fair, but I don't think it's like a completely different personality.
No, because one assumes that he had to make this choice at some point on his own, and then the fairies decided to help him. But
yeah,
who knows?
But I just like it because, well, I like it in concept, obviously, but also like it doesn't. It's not like it's like introducing a new idea for Santa, which also seems very practical if you think about it, with like the business thing and all that. But also still keeps the whimsy and the heart that makes kids gravitate towards Santa Claus.
Yeah, and this special in general does an amazing job of sort of capturing what the feeling of Christmas is as a child.
Yeah. Also, one sec. I have another photo to the show. The dude has the hottest wife. Mrs. Claus, and I'm going to get straight here. Mrs. Claus is a baddie. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong.
You're not wrong. It's just funny.
Like, I don't. How is it that the guy who is the somewhat embodiment of Christmas, or an avatar for Christmas,
Mm-hmm.
able to get such smoking hot babes? Granted, this is an early Butch Hartman show that made the Tooth Fairy fucking hot. So
He did.
yeah,
Did indeed do that. Yes. and expressed perfectly what every woman on Earth's reaction to that would be. By the way, in the like I know Butch Hartman's obsession with gender jokes gets annoying, especially later on, but he's good at capturing that women are not perfect, and especially in this day and age, that's like that's refreshing that he understands not just how men's minds generally speaking work, but also how women's minds generally speaking work, and how that's not always a great thing. But in Santa's defense, whoever marries him does get backdoor immortality out of it. So I can understand why he gets the hot babe at that point.
But also, I do want to point out is Mrs. Claus does seem to be like a very caring, supportive wife too, which is always the depiction of Mrs. Claus anyway.
Yeah. But she's all the version of her in this is also a badass because she seems to have as much sway over the corporate structure of Christmas
Oh yeah, no,
as
totally. Like
Nick does.
there's
So
no doubt in my mind that they had a 50-50 deal on. Like
yeah.
she wasn't like the right hand woman to him. She was the co-owner, the partner.
Yeah, and let's also be honest. As with any relationship, to be honest, most of the power there is with the woman. But the moment that makes me think that she's probably a woman not to be fucked with type person, is when Timmy finally comes to his senses and realizes that wishing for Christmas every day was a bad idea. She's the one who says, or Santa says something to the effect of, "I understand why you did it. You just wanted to bring joy to everyone and experience the joy of Christmas all year round." And then she looks at him and goes, "But you're getting coal for the rest of your life." Enters it into the computer.
I mean, to be fair, that's reasonable.
Yeah, it's not wrong. It's just I enjoy how direct and curt she is. Like again, this woman is not to be fucked with.
I mean, hey, she's a woman in a business suit. Come on.
Well, and how many generations of human bullshit has she had to deal with because of the thing?
Fair enough.
I feel like she is the one who puts brakes on his giving nature. Like when he gets over giving or over joyful, she probably puts the brakes on him, which he needs, especially when he's infused with that much good magic. Like
Yeah. But yeah, no, it's, yeah, those are our top 5 Santa Clauses, like in
yep,
fictional depictions at least.
yep.
I don't think I have anything else to really say.
Nope. It seems like a good enough time as any to call it.
Okay, so with that, folks, I want to say goodbye, adios, aloha, auf Wiedersehen, sayonara, peace, cheers, and
Have a happy, holly jolly fuck off.
and because we're gonna miss it, because it's gonna be on Saturday.
Yep.
Wish y'all, all those who celebrate Christmas, we wish y'all a Merry Christmas here at Podcast of the Storm.
Yep.
And
Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night.